Hi everyone, my name is Angel. I'm here to pitch for Alberta Sex Positive Education and Community Centre, which offers shame-free sex ed and queer supports and a wealth of other programs that hopefully I'll get to touch on today. I don't have time to get into every single team member that we have at ASPECC. There's 7 folks on our board that are volunteers. We have 400 plus members here in Edmonton and 200 plus volunteers that make ASPECC run and create the programs and keep everything running. The thing to know is that every single volunteer and board member got involved because they came to ASPECC as an attendee and they were so moved, so touched by the degree of consent, by the empowerment, by the inclusion, by the safety and learning at the center that they just had to get involved. Except for me, because I'm one of the original founders. So in 2015, after years in a community that I had understood to be really consensual, I experienced a sexual assault, and that resulting backlash from me coming forward and all of that made it really clear to myself and some really close supporters that there was a lot of sex negative values in that community. And then as I went to do counseling and talk to the police and that kind of thing, we very quickly learned that although our community talked more about consent, that sex negativity was so pervasive in society that it was really hard to untangle it. I switched my major at that point. I wanted to really understand what causes that sex negativity in society and what has to be done to create change. And that's where ASPECC came from. And what started as a space that was supposed to be somewhere where you could go to explore your sexuality with a very high consent bar and has grown to reflect community needs. And one of my favorite examples of this is when we first got our space on the North End, we had a group of youth who showed up. I just put the pride flag up in the door. That was our signage. And these kids showed up and they were like, "What do you got for us?" And I was flummoxed. Like, what do you mean? Like, there's Pride Center, there's GSAs, there's like, what do you need? And we spent, myself and a few volunteers, spent all day with these youth. And many of them were pretty disenfranchised. They'd been removed from homes because of their queerness or, sexuality, gender, and they often struggle to find safety even in the supports that were out there, like, the group homes and the shelters and whatnot because of their queerness. And thus the Queer Youth Art Project was born. Alison Tunis, an amazing artist, go look her up. She found funding to run the Queer Youth Art Project out of ASPECC for a year. And when that funding ran out, our adult members who only attended like the 18 plus stuff, which is how we bring in the funding, they started donating to the youth group. And we were able, out of that generosity, to keep the youth group going until the pandemic shut our doors. And that's pretty impressive. It's just one of those examples of how, as things happen in our community, we're able to respond and find the resources, and the entire community comes together to address that. I have no words for how powerful that was. Yeah, and like things have changed. We have a lot of new programs. We've got a lot of ideas about where we're going as well, and we just keep responding to community needs. One of the needs that we're noticing that we've been doing our best to address and are seeking supports for right now are that since the pandemic started, a lot of people have more time at home and in their personal lives, and they're thinking about themselves in ways that they've never thought about before. And that includes thinking about their sexuality and their gender and realizing that they're not as straight or as cisgender as they thought they were. So we've fielded over 200 calls and reach outs from folk that are struggling with that, and we've supported them and helped them find the right organizations to go to, and information on how to even have that conversation with your partner or your doctor, etc. Another thing that's happened that's kind of on the same line is that a lot of organizations and families have been reaching out looking for education and training on being more inclusive for gender diverse individuals. And that's incredible, and we appreciate it, and we've built a lot of programming around that as well. And of course, at the start of the pandemic, there were a lot of people who were struggling to access things like condoms and even information on sexual health because all of the places you used to be able to go had shut down. And so we started a mail out program for condoms and sexual health information to address that need. And mainly that was youth and sex workers and seniors that were accessing that, although other demographics too, but the majority. Um, Barriers and not condoms. The barriers to sex positivity and to running an organization like ours. Sex is in the name. And there's a lot of shame and stigma around sex, and that has gotten in the way of getting funding. Not only does it create problems when we want to create allyships with organizations that aren't in the same place as we are with sex positivity. Um, they love to support sex ed, but they don't like that we run the bondage class, for example. And we've addressed that. We'll talk about that after. But it also got in the way of us getting our charity license. When we first applied, we got a phone call and they're like, "You're not a charity. You run things like orgasm fundraisers. You can't be a charity." And we got to explain to the government that an orgasm fundraiser isn't what they're picturing, although I like where their thoughts are going. It was about educating people about the performative nature of pleasure when it comes to vulva-based persons and how to destigmatize vulva-based pleasure and make it something that's empowered rather than something that's built around the appreciation from masculine folks, and how that plays into sex negative values around sex. And we've reapplied and we'll reapply again if we get turned down this time. We'll just keep tweaking whatever we need to tweak to make that happen. So the hugest barrier is stigma and shame, and of course, money. Like getting funding is always a problem. I know I've gone over my 5 minutes. I really appreciate your patience, and I welcome any questions at this time.